from the beautiful country of Thailand, where we are currently taking part in an FDIB program titled Experiential Immersion by Deepak Ohri. My name is Jillian Avendaño. I'm the program director at FIU's Center for International Business Education and Research. And FIU houses one of 16 cyber centers in the United States with the main goal of promoting US competitiveness and international business thanks to a Title VI grant from the Department of Education. I'd like to welcome you to the FIU IB Speaker Series brought to you by FIU Cyber, FIU's Pino Global Entrepreneurship Center, and the World Happiness Foundation. The topic of today's discussion is a fascinating topic, and it's the concept of demarketing and happiness in the post-COVID era. We are very lucky to be joined by none other than the father of modern marketing and a board member of the World Happiness Foundation, Dr. Philip Kotler. And we're also joined by, and welcome, we're also joined by the CEO of Labua Hotels and Resorts. He also serves as the Chief Happiness Officer of Labua. He's an executive in residence in entrepreneurship and innovation at the Pino Center. And he's also a special cyber advisory board member. He's a board member of the World Happiness Foundation. And he's also author to an amazing book called The Bridge Not Too Far, where creativity meets innovation. Also joining us is the president of the World Happiness Foundation, Luis Gallardo. So I'd like to welcome Luis to speak first, and we're happy to have you all here.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This is amazing. Thank you for the introduction. And being in Bangkok as well today with this expedition led by Anna and Deepak Ohri on behalf of Cyber and the Pino Center is being eye-opener for so many people being in Bangkok and traveling and seeing the cultural heritage and the future of a country that is really leading in so many ways, and from Buddhist values to entrepreneurs to founders to companies and business leaders such as Deepak. I feel that when you are in this type of country, you feel the energy and you see, actually, you feel a bright future ahead. And that's why today we wanted to frame this topic of demarketing. Actually, is an old topic that Professor Kotler started talking about probably almost 50 years ago. And is probably as relevant today as it started to be at that time. But today we are going to be framing the conversation around demarketing and happiness. Here we have two board members of the World Happiness Foundation, and we all are trying to advance the agenda of business and institutions working towards a common good with a higher purpose. And this is in many ways based on Professor Kotler's thinking, and you will learn from today as well through our conversations, is very much into the experience building of Deepak Ohri in the hospitality industry and beyond. So with that, I have a first question for you, Professor Kotler, and is what is the state of marketing post-COVID? Have we learned anything? Where are we headed?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. COVID, I wish we were in post-COVID, literally, but COVID's going to last a longer time than that because it generates new variants. And so all of us will continue to have to be careful. I just heard of some city that is just locking down again because they have a bad spread of COVID. But in any case, what's the world going to look like and what's business going to look like as things get better? Well, there's three possibilities. One is that we go back to the normal world we all knew pre-COVID. It was a busy world. People were able to acquire all the goods they wanted if they had the money to buy them, which points to another problem we'll talk about later. And let's just say it would be a state of back to normal marketing. A second state for the economy, and the state of the economy will affect the state of marketing, of course. So a second state is what I call the sustainable marketing state. We didn't have a problem of sustainable marketing that we realized until recently. We learned that the whole process of industrialization creates a lot of carbon. Carbon, when generates, it turns that it traps heat on the earth. In doing that, it warms up the planet. And so we know that will lead to crises in equatorial countries. Specifically, they will be too hot to live in. And so people will have to migrate up toward Europe or down to Australia to get cooler weather, which will pose immigration problems, the likes of which we've never seen before. To avoid the worst of that situation, we have to maybe start controlling the use of materials. We always have been very negligent about nature and about its materials, but more and more people are preaching now that we have to recover the materials, we have to reuse them, we must remanufacture them, we shouldn't be wasting. So a company that's doing sustainable marketing is a different type of company that is ignoring all that and just making more plastic and more pollution and so on. Now, the third possibility is degrowth, which will use demarketing, of course. Now, degrowth is getting some headlines now. It means that we'll encourage maybe less advertising, because advertising does create more demand and sells more products. We will discourage a company from making a new style every so often. The fashion industry itself has 4 seasons or whatever, at least in the North. And therefore, there's a lot of material made, and people want, and they do their best to get women to want to look fashionable and look the latest. And we now wonder why their closets are full of clothes and shoes that they never get to, that the whole economy seems to be based on getting people to buy more than they need. So that would be the third possible development. And each of those will have quite an impact that's different on the role of marketing. So I'll pause.
Thank you so much, Professor Kotler. We'll have time to comment on that. Before Deepak, same question. How do you feel? Where are we heading with marketing?
I think we are heading towards a better world. And why I say that, post-COVID. So I think the COVID, like Dr. Kotler has said, is going to take some time before things settle down. But while it is going to take some time before things settle down, things have already started unsettling. And all that, how the world has reacted in this many years to COVID. We got rid of people because the mentality of every organization is to survive and make more profits. Okay, in certain countries in the Western world, where the governments went out of their way to support the organizations and individuals, that is where we are seeing a lot of people are readjusting to the new life and to the new job environment. So we are seeing issues at Heathrow Airport, Schiphol Airport, that is the basis of people traveling. The world population is on rise. The technology is creating another thing which is not very real. So we are living in a real world, facing real situations, and suddenly we saw the introduction of NFT and metaverse and moving towards something which is not very real. So on one side, the fashion industry in the world is talking about stopping the counterfeit. And on the other side, we are producing something which is not real, more expensive than the real world. But one good thing that is happening is there's a rise of 5G. If we see in this world, whenever the telephone technology has changed, we have seen the rise of new organizations, and we have seen the beginning of new way of life. So we have to see with the 5G how we will move forward. But moving now, I think demarketing and happiness should be the agenda for every organization, because that is the only way we save the planet and make the planet happy.
Very interesting.
So when I listen to you both, and I'm framing this around happiness and world happiness, I always wonder how we can put our brains and our behaviors together in order to achieve world happiness. I mean, I think that we all agree that every human being deserves to be happy. Do you have ideas, Professor Kotler, how marketing can help us to achieve happiness for all?
Yes, I do have ideas. I just want to make a comment that something was said by Deepak about the metaverse should come into the discussion, because it gave me an idea suddenly that maybe we can have a happy life, not in the real marketplace, but in the metaverse. And that it will keep us from needing to buy very many things, because we can attend a comedy show there, which we can do on television anyways. We can build our own home there. So it may be a way to soften the blows of the real world. But we will move on to your question about, can marketing improve world happiness? The first thing I thought of is, what are the forces that affect the level of happiness in the world? Because it's a very unhappy world, by the way. We should put that out right now, that there are so many unhappy people. Why? Inflation, and we're trying to control it, but it's not a force that, it will come down eventually, but it's causing a great deal of frustration. Job satisfaction could be okay, but we're seeing signs called quiet quitting. People who have a job, but they're not going to put energy into the job as long as they're not going to be fired. And that means maybe job dissatisfaction is a factor that is affecting happiness. Like if people are not happy at work, which is one half of their life, maybe, that's bad. Third, growing income disparity. So much increasing income and wealth is going to a few people in the world. I even saw an article which predicted that in the end, there will be the whole economy will be in the hands of about a dozen billionaires, and everyone else is a serf. Back to feudal times. Let's see what we can do we believe that if we had more reasonable distribution of income, there would be more happiness in the world. The fourth problem that affects the amount of happiness is fractured societies. A fractured society means that even the nation is split. And even in the United States, we have the reds and the blues, and they don't talk to each other. Any woman who is a blue will not marry a red person, namely a Trump person. And that fractured society is producing an incredible amount of loneliness. And happiness is adversely affected. I have three more factors. The growing drug abuse problem has been a serious one, especially the more serious drugs. I do know that there's been a reform toward marijuana and cannabis, and even in Thailand, I read recently, they were one of the first Asian countries to open up to medical uses, certainly, of marijuana, where it will help people. But that's still the drug addiction, and anything that becomes a source of addiction might be bad. Alcoholism leads to happiness, very fake happiness. Persons drink themselves into a state where they're not happy, and they are more happy maybe than they're drowning in that substance in order to make up for not being happy people. And the final one is diseases of all kinds. I mean, the spread of diabetes, and then aging. Aging, someone ought to research how many people get happier as they get over their 60s and 70s and 80s, and how many go kaput, and how many commit suicide. Now, I mentioned that list of factors, all of which it's very hard to influence. So if we're going to try to have more happiness in the world, we have to increase our ability to control those 6 or 7 sources of unhappiness. In other words, you don't cheerlead people and feel that if we just stand and smile and they catch some of that, we know that will be momentary. It wouldn't last if they are essentially unhappy. So the best job we could do to increase happiness is to reduce each of those problems. In fact, my field of social marketing that I helped create was one of the reasons we created social marketing. It was to examine problems that lead people to have health problems, injury problems, say no to drugs. All of our efforts that stop smoking cigarettes, etc., was an effort to relieve or reduce these problems. Now, the next thing I'd say is happiness consultants can play a role. Lewis is doing a marvelous job of studying this and explaining how we can get more happiness in the world. But what is the role also besides people like Lewis? And as I understand that, Deepak, you have a part title as the happiness head of happiness for your property people and so on. But what is the role of psychiatrists? Are they, by definition, to correct a person's problems so they would be happier? And yet the way they're doing it is with drugs. You go to a psychiatrist basically because they know you're depressed, and they can reduce the amount of that. What about regular therapists who are trained in psychology and they are consulting people about how to have a better life? We should see what they're part of the happiness movement, in a sense. They may not see that themselves playing that role. And sometimes I end up thinking that is the real job to have a happiness foundation or a well-being foundation. And the two should coexist if there was another one. In other words, do we work on the problem of getting happier people, or do we work on the problem of getting more people to feel well, their better well-being, their health is better, and the basics are better so that they can live, if not a happy life, a better life. So I'll stop here. As far as can marketing improve world happiness, just as I attempted to size up the problem we're facing.
Yeah, this is fantastic, and you define very well 7 key areas where we can influence. I mean, at some point we call this the conditions. So these are all conditions.
Yes.
And we know as well that from all the research that there's both the conditions and actually the inner being of how do we understand those conditions, and it depends on human to human and culture to culture. That's why the complexity of the topic is very big, but I really appreciate the direction that you are taking. So building on that, Deepak, any comments to Professor Kotler's solution? Something that I witnessed myself being at your property is how employees behave. And when you see employees as happy and as caring as the employees that you have at Lewa, it is overwhelming. And actually, I've been talking to so many of them, and they've been around for years and years. And they seem to be very, very happy, and actually people that really want to make other people happy. So maybe we can comment on Professor Kotler's solutions, but I would love to tap as well into the topic of experience and the topic of feeling and caring as part of what we do, to make other people happy.
Thank you, Luis, for bringing this up, but I completely agree what Dr. Kotler has defined. The usage of certain things, disproportion, and overusage. So I'll come to your thing first about Labua, and then I would like to add few things to what Dr. Kotler has identified. So why Labua people are happy? Very simple. In our life, we all go through a lot of experiences, and most of our experiences are painful. And how do we replicate those experiences and take out the pain for other people? So I always wanted to grow, very ambitious person, and I had to go through a lot of pain to achieve. And the biggest pain was recognition. So what we have done at Labua, where service in Thailand, service is an essence. People give very good service. What we have done in Labua is that we have allowed people to dream and also given them resources to execute the dreams. Now, saying that, if we take this in a wider spectrum, allowing people to dream and giving them resources to execute those dreams is an education. So if we put the whole context to where the world is, the only bridge that can solve these issues is education. If we have to look for happiness ambassador, everybody who's in this education or in the education industry should be the happiness ambassador. And why? We have seen a lot of issues, overusage of, there's a drug abuse, overusage of technology, overusage of world resources, everything. But what are we going to do about that? Because we never had looked back and gone back to the drawing board, what to do. We have learned from COVID one very simple thing. When the COVID began, we were all looking at quants. We never looked at the qualitative aspect. So the whole teaching that was taking place was forgotten during a time of crisis. During a time of crisis, and it is still crisis, but not at that level what we saw, we asked a lot of employees to leave the jobs. And now we are going back to those people and say, why you're not happy? What have we done to those people whom we asked that you cannot be working? Has there been an unconditional apology to those people? What have we done to create new jobs for them? What have we done to bring the confidence back to those people? At Labua today, if we are saying people are happy, there's only one reason. During the time of crisis, we all stood together and we never fired a single employee. There are many organizations who have done that. But you know what was the most challenging aspect? There's a very big organization in Thailand. They approached us and says, are you scared of laying off people? We can help you. We can teach you how to lay off the employees. So the basic essence of humanity was forgotten. I was told that I am not a courageous leader because I cannot fire people. So when the world has to set right, the only way the world has to set right is through education. Educating people the right usage and the right amount. So the overusage is the big thing that is what is affecting the balance. And that's why demarketing is essential. Right now, everyone is happy because you see how we are using the words. Resignation is a negative word, but we have made it a great word by adding the great resignation. Shopping can be a great therapy, but we have put a negative word in front of that called revenge shopping. And so what are we teaching the world by using these kind of phrases? These kind of phrases are being used to attract. It is a marketing thing to attract people to listen to you. Great resignation. Oh yes, let's read about that. Revenge shopping. Okay, let's go revenge shopping. No, because you know what we are doing by using these words, we are creating an overusage, or we are highlighting the things which should not be highlighted. It should be forgotten. And right now, what Dr. Philip Kotler had started in 1973 should be a word for every organization: demarketing. And happiness will come out of that. Happiness is not a product, it is a byproduct of our actions. So we have to correct our actions to create happiness. And how do we correct our actions? By educations, by senior leaders in the industry. And I think what you're doing, Louis, by creating the World Happiness Fest, I think that would be a great forum where the world leaders can listen. And that could be the first step in the right direction.
Professor Kotler, any comments to Deepak's ideas?
Well, I'm finding them very exciting ideas about recognition and the use of certain words. And of course, the truth that education is going to be the best bridge we'll have to creating a better world. However, part of the problem that I didn't mention is population is growing too high for the carrying capacity of the earth. We had in 1960, 6 billion people. Now we have approaching 8 billion people. What is the carrying capacity of the earth to feed, house, and clothe that? Let me give you something I heard in a African country. The ruler has said this: every man should be married to at least 4 women and give birth to 4 children. That makes the man producing 16 children. I mean, for 4 children, but 4 wives, it is 16, 4 times 4. And now there are even nations that say, well, we don't have enough new people, so we better grow a lot and we'll pay you for having more babies. But I think underlying the problem in part is that we don't create quality for people, we create quantity. We have to start thinking about making, wouldn't it be a better world with less people who are very happy and thriving and excited than a world full of so many people who don't have enough means to live well, and so on and so forth. So those are just things that were ticked off in my mind in listening to Deepak.
Yeah, so interesting. Before coming to Thailand, I was in India and before in Bhutan. And there you see the big difference. 800,000 people living in a country that encourage gross national happiness, and 1.3 billion people living in another country such as India that is very crowded, and you feel it wherever you go in India is hundreds of thousands of people. So I think that the way you solve problems in Bhutan and in India are probably a bit different. Yes, because of that size. And we see this in many other places. So
let me shut I have a sound back there. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. So in that case, Deepak, as Dr. Kotler is coming, Nancy Richmond has a great question about compassion. And this is something that we've been learning in Thailand based on Buddhist philosophy and Buddhist values, how compassion is rooted into all these Buddhist values. As we know, we have the two winds, wisdom and compassion, are key to this philosophy. And this is very much ingrained in the culture. So what do you think about compassion, and how does compassion can play a role in business today and in the future, Deepak?
See, if you see Thai society, and I come from India, all over the world, we are forgetting our heritage and culture. But Thailand is, with generations, they are actually maintaining their culture and heritage. And why? Because Buddhism teaches that before taking, you have to learn to give. Now, coming back to compassion on this. So people are here, they preserve their culture, their heritage, and they follow Buddhism. And Buddhism's teaching, I'm not advocating for any religion, but Buddhism teaching can be taken as management principles. And they are very, very strong principles. Coming to Nancy's question, how do we teach compassion? See, in a modern world, there are two kinds of organizations, principle-based and rule-based. Now, principle-based, how we have defined that the startups are principle-based, and when the organizations become mature, they become rule-based. Okay. If we create a hybrid organizations, that will bring a lot of compassion, or if not a lot of compassion, a beginning of compassion in the organizations. And again, coming back to the same thing, education has got us to this level of overusage, and education will take us to a different level of happiness and being self-reliant. Self-sufficiency is very important. We don't have to go for deglobalization. The world has to be global. But now what Dr. Kotler has talked about populations, with China one-child policy, China is going to go through a very different outcome in next 30 to 40 years. Japan, aging society. Okay, India, overpopulation. Bhutan, gross happiness index, but GDP is not working. So I think what we are losing is, in a democratic world, we have put the blinkers on. We are only taking up on one subject and not looking at the globalization. Once we take the whole globalization in a context, we will be able to look at the issues in a more pragmatic manner and will come with better solutions. One or two or three people cannot come with this solution. We are talking about climate change. The world is changing. We need to stop the world from changing before working towards the climate change. Nobody is talking about the world because suddenly it has become a keyword. And the world is running about these keywords. I think I would be very happy if the World Happiness Foundation and the World Happiness Fest is attended by the world leaders, so they can look at things quantitatively and qualitatively and work towards creating an educated world. Education is a key for all the issues. Out of 8 billion people, how many people are getting the education? And in education also, there's a discrimination. You have private schools, you have community schools. Education is education. Happiness is happiness. We cannot change it. The word happiness is happiness. Education is education. We have to first make these two things very clear to the world and its population. Once we have done that, then the next steps will follow. That's my take.
Thank you, Deepak. Professor Kotler, why don't we go a bit deeper on a good business? Because, I mean, if we look at governments, to me personally, it's very easy and obvious that why do we need governments? Because they have, and I'm talking about countries, cities, and so on. Well, because they have to manage resources, thinking of the common good, and being responsible for overall well-being and happiness. I mean, if some governors or presidents of states and cities don't think that way, that's why we are here as a foundation. We have to remind them why they are in power, because that's obvious. I mean, that's what people want. But when we think of business, and we know that 50% of the wealth is managed by institutions, countries, and so on, and 50% by business. What makes a good business? Can we talk about that and maybe bring some examples of what makes a good business?
Yes, it's an excellent question. What makes a good business these days? There was a woman scholar, and I'm trying to remember her name, but she said that businesses are changing in their practice, in their norms of running a good business. Because originally the idea of the boss was setting orders and rules for his people to follow. It is almost like a dictatorship kind of idea at the start, but then people moved, she suggested, toward businesses being run with more expertise, where everyone is well educated for the job that they're doing, and maybe have a little more freedom to do it well without being told exactly how to do it. But she said it's moved into a third stage of the empathetic organization, which is it treats its workers, suppliers, and distributors. Those are all what we call stakeholders. It wants them all to be members of the team and happy and rewarded fairly. Don't give all the rewards to the top managers and leave the others to struggle. After all, the success and productivity was teamwork. And so now examples of that. I'm very impressed with the Unilever company. It was run for 10 years by Paul Holman, who wrote, by the way, a wonderful recent book describing what great management really is. But the thing is, he practiced what he called sustainable marketing, not the old marketing. He wanted to produce at Unilever zero carbon output. That is, there will be carbon output, but there will be anti-carbon output too. It would be a company that is stakeholder oriented rather than shareholder oriented. He made shareholders number 7 in his list of people to satisfy, not number 1. The shareholders, the investors, are number 7 to be satisfied. Now, I read a statement recently that the most empathetic companies include, now here are the ones that they studied on empathy, which is the third stage of good business. Microsoft had a score of 100% on the empathetic, the way it treats its people there. Facebook, Tesla Motors, Alphabet, the Google firm. You know, we hear about the parties at these places. I mean, at Google, they serve you all kinds of food, and you're an employee, you're playing at a pool table or ping pong some of the time, but it's not all work. They listed Procter & Gamble, Audi, and a number of others. There are lists of companies that are high in empathy with their people. And I equate empathy, being high in empathy, with being high in happiness of the employees. And I know Deepak will have more to say about that. And maybe his own company is one of the best companies to list as an example of the new business leadership style. So we'll hear from him.
Thank you, Dr. Kotler. Coming out of you is great, but I want to point one thing, Luis, about happiness. Happiness is, like you said, let's go deeper. So I'm going a little deeper. Happiness is how to take sorrow in a positive manner, how to stay with the sadness. Happiness is not always smiling. Happiness is always, because the world will never be, this world is a jungle. And even in a jungle, there are issues and challenges. So how do you face challenges actually smiling? How do we meet the globalization actually smiling or with happiness? Happiness is also always not smiling also. Like Bhutan, I want to do this experiment in this life. I want to take 6 most happiest people from Bhutan and take them to USA and say, now 1 year, you have to manage your own expenses. You have to work hard, and let's see whether they remain happy or not. Environment is very important in happiness, and happiness is a global world. And environment is also never same in different parts of the world. Even the resort where we are staying, the environments are very different in different parts of this resort, Louis. So the idea is we cannot create a neutral environment. We cannot create a different population, different culture, a common thread. The common thread is we have to teach people how to endure pain and know your breaking point. And that will teach people to be successful, and success will bring happiness. Success doesn't mean that you have to be part of 2,686 billionaires club. You can be your own entrepreneur as an employee in any organization. And once that thought comes, that will bring happiness. Happiness is actually managing our own needs. It starts from within. And we as educators are GPS, guiding them, not preaching them.
Yes.
Once we start preaching, we are actually advocating happiness, and it's not going to bring happiness. We should be a guide rather than preacher. That's how I will define the first step towards happiness. The world has to remain same. We cannot change the world. The globalization will remain, technology will remain. Usage of that has to be administered.
So building on educate, yes, Professor
Yeah,
Kotler.
well, one question, there's a number of people who are happiness educators, or they are in the happiness business. And I love your distinction, Deepak, that they shouldn't be preaching and getting people to smile so much as to guide them. And that means many things, but that was a very good distinction.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I agree completely with that. And actually, we have one question in this case from William Newbury about that: is how do we focus on education and educators at all levels, and what do we do with them in order to help them improve the life and the future of leaders and their abilities to create an environment that is supportive of happiness? What do we do with these professionals?
You know, it's like asking Louis, what does the school do with the bully at the school? What does the school do with the suicidal type student who sees nothing rewarding in life? So if we could have a typology of student dispositions and work out good theories on correcting those in time before they're too old, so that these are habits of behavior rather than we're so interested in just teaching them math. You know, we should teach math, of course, and this and that, but how about bringing peoplehood to these people? They are people and total people. And can teachers be loving people, or at least models of loving people?
I think what Dr. Kotler has said in one sentence, it means a book can be written on that. A very, very valid point. And I will take this as an example on myself, being in India. The Indian education system, political system, reform system has a base of Greek mythology. But you know where the difference lies? Indians don't believe in that. So you have an education system in a country, but the population is not believing in that. So how do you bring happiness? So what he said, that we need to teach maths, but we need to understand the culture. We have forgotten the culture. There's nothing called universal culture. We have to understand, like I mentioned in my book, A Bridge Not Too Far. The culture, when you use a lowercase c and an uppercase c, is different. One is being adjective and one is the usage. Once we are able to create a bridge, which is not too far, between these two words with a lowercase and uppercase, and understanding people, the education is already reformed.
We have an incredible example coming from T.S. Podiel, who was the former Ministry of Education in Bhutan, and he's part of the World Happiness Foundation board. When he rolled out 5 years program on green schools in Bhutan, and talking to him a few days ago, I asked him, well, if we were to choose only one subject that we teach at school, what would that be? And he thought about it, and he said, actually, before I tell you what he said, I want to ask you the same question. What would you teach if we only were to teach one thing? And then I tell you what T.S. Powell told me.
Deepak, you first.
I think I'm going to teach something that know yourself. We all stand in front of mirror, but we don't know ourselves. All our time we are spending in knowing our neighbors and other people. The day we will know ourselves, it's a different world we are living in.
It's Socrates too.
Yeah.
I just remember a quote that happiness rests on 4 foundations. I don't have that answer yet on the one subject that you will teach, but we'll get to it. The 4 foundations are family, friendship, work, and faith. Faith being having a culture, a good culture that you care about. And that there are 4 fake happiness items. The 4 fake ones are money, power, fame, and pleasure. They are not sources of happiness necessarily. And that the barriers to all of this is fear, ego, and attachments of various kinds, interfering with the 4 foundations. But back to the subject of that you would teach, can we say, can you teach a course in love? I think it would be kind of vapid to try to, maybe we should just run movie pictures that are healthy styles of life and showing how people have met challenges and succeeded and felt good about it. So I'm not able to, I want to give that more thought, but I want to hear what this person said.
Yeah, T.S. Powell. Well, you are very close because, the poet of love is Rumi. For many, right? This Sufi poet, Rumi, that made love actually part of his life. And I mentioned that because actually what he said, T.S. Powell said poetry. I will teach poetry. And then he justified that, and it's so interesting. Is the complexity of teaching poetry requires the interconnection of a rational and emotional mind. So it's one of those most complex subjects to teach, and that gives us the opportunity to know ourselves and actually learn about love. So that's what he said.
The comment that I would make is I love the idea of poetry being taught. Unfortunately, students, when they know that their taking a literature course, they don't turn on to poetry. Maybe it's badly taught. And if it were well taught and they really got it, it would be enough to get them started.
That will,
I
yes.
have a point to make here, Luis. It's a very well thing, poetry, but again, it's not a very balancing act because the human brain has two sides, right side and left side. And whatever we do, what we're trying to teach and how people will absorb depends on how we create a balance between the right side and the left side of the brain, because that is the part of us. And what is part of us is how we will see the things. So it's good to say poetry, but then it satisfies only one part. And then that won't be a balance. And there's nothing called a perfect balance. So we have, it's something we have to keep on working, but education should be concentrating on creating a balance of right side and left side of the brain.
Well, then let me add a possible course sprung from your idea. I would insist that the whole program be based on Aristotle.
Yes.
Aristotle's book is so real on so many theories of life, but including happiness. And the basic principle is balance. Namely, if you go too far with any virtue, it becomes a vice. If it's too little, it's not working at all. So Aristotle, if you keep thinking about all of these virtues and vices, you'll see that balance is, and this is what Deepak said, you said in the left side and right side, but to balance these emotions in the right way is very important to learn how to do.
Thank you, sir.
I love it. This is fantastic. We call this harmonic coherence in many ways. And how do we
say
get
it again?
into
Harmony.
Coherence. Yes, harmony, but in this is a coherence, is harmonic coherence, which is balance in the end. But I feel this is fantastic because it's very close to neutrality. It's very close to a yin and yang working together. Is very close to actually balance. So why we only have a few minutes left, a couple of minutes. Why don't we focus on one challenge that you see in the coming months and one potential solution to the challenge? So one challenge, one potential solution.
One challenge is coming out of the fact we have a war going on now, with two countries, which should never have happened. And it shows how empire builders, sometimes a single individual, can destroy so many people. And the UN, unfortunately, is failing to be what it was set up to do. And in an article I just finished writing, and it's now published in a magazine called Medium, it's called Saving the World, something like Saving the World Through Peacemaking. So we've always had peacemakers. Various organizations all around the world want more peace, because without peace, how can you have the basis for happiness? So I wrote this saying that maybe the United Nations has to be reconstituted. It needs to have an army too, supported by the 180 members of the United Nations. And that when Russia attacks Ukraine, immediately the United Nations, not the bloc that is supposed to help Ukraine, that wasn't enough. They immediately get 180 countries saying, Russia, you're behaving criminally. You're going to go to the World Court, where we will put someone like Putin in jail. And I can't see, I was once asked, how do you market peace? And I said, that's a very hard thing to do. It's like, how do you market happiness? So what you do is you identify everything that disturbs peace, and you have people working on each of the components that is harming peace. And I want to note that one of the real problems also that is coming up is depolarization, is polarization. How many nations are polarized. They have two groups within, and they hate each other. The idea that a woman might end up marrying, she's a Trump woman, and the other man is a liberal, they would not get married. They would avoid each other like the plague. And I heard that there's a group that's starting up. You can look them up. Their name is Braver Angels. Braver Angels. Their mission is to depolarize countries, get them to be more unified in their sense of the country they are part of. Because when you think you have two countries, you begin to talk about civil war. And there's that expression, civil war, once it starts being used, some Texas may say, maybe that's the answer. We don't need the other kind of states. We'll just have a civil war and leave the Union, which was the Civil War of the United States back in 1860. Anyways, those are some of my thoughts about if we could get more peace and depolarization, it would be a better world.
Thank you so much, Professor Kotler. Deepak?
So I'll say both the things in one line. The rise of right wing is the challenge, and how do we do it? Is we use less usage of our resources and work towards balancing the world. That will be the solution.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think that what I'm hearing here is how do we move from what is being a deep philosophy for business and for many people, which is the art of war and Sun Tzu's, into the art of peace and Aikido. So I think that we have to balance, because Aikido, you know, it is the art of defending yourself without harming the opponent. And that creates balance, because you don't destroy life. And this is one of the challenges that I see myself as well, very much linked to what you are saying. And we are able to move into this art of peace that could be very much rooted into your answers. So I really appreciate that. Okay, well, we've been talking for an hour now, and I have to say thank you. Hey, hello, Julia, here you are to say,
Speaking so.
to say bye.
It's been great.
Hopefully it was interesting. It was amazing for me.
Yeah.
Learning from you, Professor Kotler, is always a bless. And Deepak Ohri, you are one of those CEOs that is leading and is going to be leading this new business for good that we truly need in the world. So thank you so much both for joining, and thank you Cyber and Pino and FIU Business for hosting this event.
Thank you. On behalf of FIU, yeah, we're very pleased that you all have agreed to come speak with us. This has been truly fascinating. And thank you also to all of the attendees who have joined us. We have a lot of people, and I imagine, joining us from all over the world. And you know, hopefully we can continue this conversation maybe in another panel.
Normally we shake hands, but I've discouraged people from shaking hands. This is the Asian way is better. Just
yes. Thank you, Dr. Kotler, for your insightful words, and what the world needs is your blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, and you were so wonderful to listen to. I've learned from you too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.
Have a great morning, evening, day to everyone.